player-led, player-only meetings. They've really held each other accountable. I think how important is that?
I think it's important that as a coach, you can sit there and talk about rules all you want and talk about things, but until the players embrace it, it remains a question, I guess. We've always had our players embrace these things, but we try to take it to another level, another step, by having player-only meetings, allowing them to digest what's going on and to talk about the educational components that we put forward and things of that nature. And then I get feedback from our senior group or our leadership group.
Mark, you mentioned during one of your signing day videos that the number one was going to come back this fall. Any more details on that? Is one person going to get that? Is it okay?
I think that's something that'll be on a game-to-game basis. A little bit on a game-to-game basis in terms of, I always talk about who brings us back. If you have an award, I'll show you the saying when we get to camp, but I always talk about who brings us back from when a game's in question. And when that one individual is named as such per game, then we'll give him the opportunity to wear number one, providing it's not an alignment.
Or do you think those player-only meetings have been effective, or is it kind of hard to tell this at this point until they get out there?
Yeah, I think they have been effective because, as I said earlier, I think player-led teams are your best-led teams. And ultimately, you have to make decisions as players, as a group individually. You have to hold each other accountable, especially off the field. You have to hold each other accountable because the coach is not always going to be there. And so I think the stronger we are in those areas, the better it is.
Mark, you said
it's a bit tough to blend between the serious and severity of some of the situations versus trying to keep it light and get these guys clearing their heads a little bit. Because I know you like to do different things like that.
Yeah, no, I love our football players. I love all my players, and I care deeply for them, and our commitment is to them. So we do different things for them. It's always going to be challenging because things are going to happen sometimes, and we've been fortunate that these things haven't happened. But now we deal with things on an in-your-face type of situation like we've talked about. So, but I don't know if I'm answering the question there or not.
Yeah, but I just mean like the bowling and the alligator wrestling and all that kind of stuff. I mean that's the time and place for some of those. I mean, tough to kind of balance that.
Yeah, we didn't really do those type of things in the early spring because I felt like we needed to, as I said to some of you guys earlier, I felt we needed to. We can't make things trivial in a situation like that. So we have to treat things with the seriousness that they are. So we had abstained from doing anything like that. We just sort of tried to hold our ground and talk very effectively with our players, tried to, and we had a lot of different meetings that talked about the situation we're dealing with. So it was all business. So as we move forward, then we can now move. When we started having interviews again, we moved forward with our football team, and you saw some different things occur, whether it was interviews or the bowling league or 7-on-7s or whatever it is. And we'll continue to do that to try and build team chemistry.
Pressure can reveal a lot about people, and in a good way too. Through this, what are some guys that maybe have emerged, Mark, forget football, that you're like, wow, that's a guy who has some real leadership abilities, just maybe guys who've impressed you as the team's gone through the problems with how they've stepped up and led?
I think Gerald Holmes is one of those guys. I think he's a guy that has sort of taken control and put himself out there a little bit. When you stand up as a leader, and I've done this with our football team, and I'm up there talking to 100, 120 people, and I get used to it, and I can talk to them. But as soon as I bring a player up there and say, okay, now you talk, it becomes a whole different ball game. So to do that, to become a leader on any football team, you got to put yourself out there a little bit, and you're subject to criticism at times. And he's been willing to do that, put himself out there. I think Brian Allen has done the same. Chris Fry has done the same, and that's why these three guys are here today.
Coach, the non-conference is important every single season. But talking with Brian and Chris, Gerald, all of them say extra emphasis on a fast start this year. How do you do it?
How do I?
Fast start. How important is it this year?
I think critical. The most important thing right now to me is how we come in next Sunday and go through camp. We need to stay healthy. We need to rebuild our football team. We've got some young players that are going to be in the mix. I think we have a talented and mature freshman class that has embraced each other and the older players. BG game obviously is very critical because it's our first game, and we move from there. Bottom line is, we always, to me, it's always about just put one foot in front of another and keep inching forward.
You're
do your best.
You were up there earlier. You're talking about the coaches you've been able to work with over the years. Is there anybody you've talked to as far as the peaks and valleys come, to go from Big Ten champs to 3-9 to what it takes to get back to that point? Is there anybody you've just consulted with about that?
Yeah, I've talked to different people. A lot of my friends have reached out to me. Whether it be Bobby Stoops or Jim Tressel, but or knows Nick Saban or whatever. But there are a lot of different people that have reached out to me over the course. In the coaching fraternity, you build a close network, and there are very, very few of us that have been through waters that haven't been troubled at some point in time, that haven't had problems. So I think, again, it's how you handle these problems and identify them and find the solutions. And that's what we're going to do.
Now, Mark, on campus, you got a chance to really gauge Sean Paulino Bell is physically.
Yeah, I think he'll be able to make camp, but he's lost some weight, so he's back to about 235 or 240, and he's young. He's just got back here. He's just learning again, so I think he's got a ways to go, but there's a learning curve, so we'll see.
Nothing physically that can hamper his future development.
I think only his level of strength right now probably is because he's weak coming off the injury.
Mark, you had mentioned the maturity of this freshman class. When you look on the recruiting trail and some of the reflection maybe you've been able to do this offseason, do you think there's anything different that you are going to be doing in terms of looking into players or things of that nature?
This year coming?
Yeah. Like
2018 class?
2018-19 class.
I think we have a great start on a 2018 class. I'm extremely impressed with those guys in terms of not just being great football players, but being great students, great people. It's been extremely impressive, and I think that class is building because of it. And they're recruiting other people that are very like-minded. So the key thing sometimes is identifying people in the spring. If you identify a person in the spring and you offer them a scholarship, can you get that guy? If you've gotten that guy by the summer, you're going to have a good recruiting class, and that's what's happening right now.
So, Mark, in terms of addressing sexual assault specifically, or players I asked about earlier, they said you had always brought in speakers in the past. There was maybe one or two more, but they didn't really know the specifics. I'm wondering, directly on that topic, can you tell me what you've done differently this offseason as opposed to other seasons?
We have brought in our director of Title IX to speak specifically to our football team. We're working hand in hand with our administration to bring people in systematically across the school year. We've had numerous player-led meetings speaking about this. You name it, everything we've tried to think of. We've certainly listened a lot. But I think the biggest educational component is really we've gone through it. And when you go through it, you figure it out real quickly. It's not, oh, this could happen or that can happen. We brought speakers in, we've done that. But when you see it happen in front of your eyes and you see the result of it on both sides, you see the tragedy that unfolds right in front of your eyes, there's a message there for everybody.
Coach, in regards to recruiting, you've done an excellent job the past decade plus of in-state talent, recruiting 3 stars, diamonds in the rough, and 5 stars as well. But my question is, since Jim Harbaugh has been pulled at Michigan, has there been a certain change, competitiveness in the state of recruiting even 3-star guys, or has it stayed relatively the same?
I think it's stayed the same. There are a certain amount of players in the state of Michigan, and there's a certain amount of players that both of us want, so it's always going to be competitive, and that's the way it's been, and it was like that before I came, and probably will be very much like that 20 years from now. It's just the nature of it.
Mark, you guys have a saying or a mantra for the season yet?
Yeah, you know, we talk about different things. We talked about the best start here, meaning that whatever we're doing, the best has to be the standard, whether it's the first practice or first meeting or how we handle ourselves off the field or in the classroom. We just have to move forward with that. But and then more and more, I just go back to that Spartan saying a Spartan's greatest strength is the warrior standing next to him. We have to be all in.
Mark,
It's been a while since this.
I was going to ask something about Gerald Holmes.
Sure.
What seems to be emerging leadership. When did you start to see that out of him, and how important is that to for the team, for the locker room? He seems to understand where leadership needs to permeate throughout classes and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, you know, he probably started that in probably December or January, and then it's really taken off with that even more so in the spring. But you know, he's a guy that was redshirted when we went to the Rose Bowl, so he's experienced, and all three of these guys, they've experienced life at a very great level. You know, Rose Bowl, Cotton Bowl, playoffs, and now they've experienced life on the other end of the spectrum. So they've dealt with everything, and I think that brings us an added maturity to how they see things, and I think Gerald is doing a tremendous job with that. And relative to our tailback situation, I think we have three guys that have played a lot of football for us that are outstanding players and very durable, tough guys with great vision, good running backs.
Yeah, he said one of the things he knows is that no matter what's happening with him on the field, whether he's the key guy on that game or not, he can't let any frustration in that be shown to the younger guys, but some of these guys are looking at him. I mean, you trust him in that role and that ability to sort of carry that through.
Yeah, I do. You know, he's one of those. He's just a great football player. He's one of those guys that's on our punt team. He's on our kickoff team. I mean, if you lined him up and said, "Hey, give me your three best linebackers," he might be one of those guys. So he's a contact guy that'll run and get you. He's got the ability to run the football. He's a team leader. I think one of the biggest things that you have to be when you lead is you have to put other people in front of you. You got to serve.
You talked about 2013 and the example he saw from guys right when he got here. Some of the lingering in the locker room, the long conversations guys had, just sort of the camaraderie that he's discovered is a rare camaraderie and made that a special group. As you've gotten away from that team, was there something about that particular group that maybe even stands out, even among some of your
the 13 group,
even among some of your other great ones?
Yeah, you know, in 2012 we basically had one leader, and he captured everybody's attention in every team meeting. And in 2013 we started to have other people step up and take part in that. And they also went through some challenges in 2012, losing some close games or whatever the case. And I think it made them stronger, and it made them have a little bit more of a mindset to move forward. That team didn't have a lot of seniors, I don't believe. I think the 14 and 15 teams had a lot of seniors. But the 13 team was a bunch of unknowns at the beginning of the season. I mean, whoever knew that Jeremy Langford would do what he did, or Connor Cook would become what he did. You know, so all those things took place, and all of a sudden things moved forward. So we need to look back and learn lessons from that, but understand that they got there by finding the inches. And that's what we have to do.
Mark, it's probably been since that year where you've come into a season where some people probably were betting against you guys. Does this team relish that position a little bit, do you think? Maybe being counted out before it starts?
Well, I hope we do. I hope we understand that life isn't given to us. And one of the things that bother you the most is entitlement. And maybe sometimes, after you win 3 years in a row, we were 36-5 when I sat here last year. And the expectations was to try and do this again, and we were unable to. And there's reasons for that. There's hard lines. From a season standpoint, there's reasons we didn't do that. But what we now have to do is recapture the moment and move forward. I can't say anything. I don't know. I must move forward 50 times a day. But that's what we have to do, and it has to really be inch by inch, because we have young players. There's a large learning curve too. So what you see as a guy who's a redshirt sophomore right now will not be what you see when he's halfway through the season. And that's a positive thing. That's a good thing.
You have bemoaned the recruiting getting moved up and moved up and moved up and accelerating. Now Nick in Alabama and Mississippi State just talking to a kid that hasn't even entered 8th grade yet. Do you look at this, and I know it's easy to laugh, but do you look at some of this stuff, Mark, and realize where the game is maybe hurting itself? The people who are entrusted with protecting it are potentially hurting it.
Yeah, I think all of this sometimes, social media, okay, let's not have a little light moment here, okay, you know, that generates a lot. There's a lot of hype that goes on out there, so you have an 8th grader that isn't even shaving, or maybe he is shaving, and that's the problem, okay? That's not going to be the same guy when he's a 12th grader, and we've seen that happen, you know, so we try and make good systematic decisions as we go, but I also think, you know, what's the hurt sometimes for somebody to offer an 8th grader? If you don't like him as a 10th grader, what's the big deal? You know, so we're just going to try and deal with things one class at a time and not get too far ahead of ourselves. And I think that's been our mode. That's what we've tried to do, and it's sort of suited us well.
What's the thought with Brandon Randall? Playing a little bit of DN from what Chris said.
Yeah.
Are there any other positions?
Yeah, we got a lot of good young players. Let's not forget that our 2016 class was very highly respected from a football standpoint. A lot of those guys are still there. Brandon Randall's a guy that, you know, is a 4'4", 4'5" guy that, you know, is now a defensive end, weighing about 230, 235, and you know, he can be a factor. He can be a pass rushing guy. He can be a guy. So he's just got to continue to come. Like I said, the learning curve. So we've got a lot of guys like that.
Have you shifted anybody else to different spots right now, or is it...
I'd have to look and see. I think tight end we're good. Offensive line. Probably that's been the one big major one, you know, going from linebacker to that. So, I can't think of any others.
Mark, full-time at defensive end then now?
Full-time.
Mark, camp is a week longer this time, in part because I really want to get rid of two-a-days. Is that kind of what you understand? But I don't know how many people had a two-a-day in the last half decade. I mean, how many two-a-days have you really had in the last?
I think we had 3 or 4 on the calendar, and I think we went with 1 or 2. Because when you get to the two-a-days the last couple of years, we've said, this is the last 3 or 4 years, we've said we didn't want to get somebody hurt, you know, ground down a little bit. They're, you know, we're going every single day. The biggest thing is we've gone every single day. Now we give them a day off, because most people, I think, have gone every day in some capacity. But you've lengthened it to it. Now it's a 5-week camp, so we have to make sure that we stay fresh, mentally, physically, stay healthy, and that'll be a challenge. But we've got to be able to orchestrate that.
How many weeks has it been in the past?
4.
Tristan Jackson, where do you see him? Where could he be, and where is he on that arc?
He's a young player that is only going to get better. I think he can be phenomenal, but you know, he's got to grow as a person too. You know, he's got to understand concepts a little bit better. I think you know, I'll just say it as I, you know, got all these reporters, so hopefully we'll send the message. Social media, you know, got to be a little bit more authoritative.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, his toughness aspect's got to come. You know, can't be a wide out mentality wise. You know, because he has a skill set that is up here. And so when you have that kind of skill set, everything needs to come with you to be a complete player. And he's just a little bit feeling his way sometimes. When he gets the ball and he gets vertical with an intensity, and I mean, he's special.
Hey Mark, is there a time in your career as a player or assistant coach or first 10 years as a head coach that you kind of drew on to personally understand what you needed to do as a leader to get through some of the problems that you had to address in the last few months? Or maybe somebody you relied on or talked with, something from the past, and I don't know if you maybe look back at time and found someone that helped guide you a little bit in what you had to deal with.
I've been very blessed to have been around. First of all, to come from a very solid family with 2 very strong parents that instilled certain things in me. Secondly, to have played for some great coaches along the way. And then thirdly, to be a graduate assistant. And then finally, being an assistant coach before I had to do it myself. So, you know the people that I've been around. I mean, Nick Saban hasn't had it easy all the time. He went through some tough times as well. You know, Jim Tressel as well. You know, we were at Youngstown State when we first built that program. We were 2-9 the first season and had to win the last game. So you build your programs. Sometimes you take a step back. You know, 7-6 in 2012. I think we were 7-5 in 2001. And in both those cases had the best years we'd ever experienced, a 14-0 season, a championship, national championship, and a 13-1 season. So I think you find greatness sometimes because of what you've endured.
You mentioned Tressel. Have you spoken to him of late? And
yeah, I talk to Tressel quite often. You know,
anything he passed along in terms of?
Yeah, my man always says, "This too shall pass."
He's a president of the university now.
He always said that. He'd look down at me and go, "This too shall pass."
We didn't really talk to you about Bob Stoops either.
Yeah, Bobby.
You guys are pretty close. I mean,
Bobby
was surprised on that, or?
Yeah, I was a little bit surprised, but I talked to him later that day, and he just said it was time. He felt like he had the right guy in place. He felt like he had his coaches in place. He felt like he had a good football team, and he could walk away at that time period, which is what he wanted to do. So he was perfectly at ease with that.
You mentioned the hype and the social media and those kind of things. So when you're recruiting, is it harder to find players, kids with the chip on their shoulder if they're being social media hyped and at the early age that they are?
I don't know. I think everybody deals with things sort of in a present time as they go. You know, in other words, you could be that guy, and then you walk into a football camp in August, and you start all over. So you have to reaffirm yourself again. So I think that's, you know, I think they can be grounded. It can become grounded. So, and I think they can get that back. Usually, you know, you're looking for guys, you know, by nature they're competitive.
What do you think with your team in particular, one that has thrived with the chip on their shoulder, when you get to camp, the record, you know, the guys know what the record was last year, would it be easier to get going with that chip?
I've always tried to look at our football team and look at people as being, you know, you're challenged personally every single day, whether you win or lose. That's something that should be instinctively in you. If you recruit the right guys, if you have the right people, that's instinctively in you. Whether we're 13-1, you know, just like last year, I can't sit here and tell you. I can sit and tell you, in all honesty, I wanted to win just as bad last year as I do this year. Just as much has gone into last year as it is as this year. So you got to play it out, and I think the most important thing for us right now is don't get too far ahead of ourselves. Just concentrate on what we can do and what we can change.
Coach, you have Iowa back on the schedule for the first time in a few years. That's been a great series. What sticks out to you about that?
Great series. Got a tremendous amount of respect for Coach, and he's endured the process as well. He's seen his teams rise from here, level off, and accelerate himself, much like we have. There's a lot of things. When I first came to Michigan State and I said, who do we want to be like? I looked across the way and I said, we want to be like Iowa. We're going to run the football, win on defense, play great special teams, win at a high level, which is what he's been able to do. And so we patterned ourselves after the things that he did. He had stability on his coaching staff. He had stability, continuity, a lot of the things that he has been able to accomplish, you know, we've tried to do as well.
What is Lewerke's potential as a leader?
I think Brian Lewerke reminds me a lot of Kirk Cousins in a lot of ways. For those of you guys who have been around him, in a lot of ways, he reminds me of him. He needs to probably step out a little bit more than as Kirk did. Kirk was a little bit more outgoing maybe to players, but very calm and collected, quick study, very intelligent, great arm strength, very competitive, has great leadership, and understands that with him, everybody goes.
You've used the word calm and collected a couple times. I think you said it at the podium as well.
Yeah.
How important is that? Like, you're losing at halftime, you need that guy who says,
Yeah, you need a guy that has supreme confidence in himself. And that's what all of our quarterbacks have had. Our guys that have succeeded at a high level, they didn't doubt themselves. Connor Cook never doubted himself. Kirk never doubted himself. Sometimes, when you're having problems, it's tough, man. It's tough. Those quarterbacks assume you got the head coach getting buried, okay, and then you got the quarterback. They assume a lot of risk and responsibility and leadership, and that's tough on a young person. But I think he's equipped.
You mentioned the Kirk Cousins comparison. Do you worry that that goes to his head, or he feels the recoil of having to live up to that, or is he solid?
No, I think he's shown no results of that going to his head. And I think we have other quarterbacks that can take the stress off him a little bit, quite honestly. And I think Damian Terry's played a lot of football for us in the program 5 years, and I think he's talented. He's got to stay healthy. I think the Weaver, he's still a young player. He was unable to perform in the spring, so we don't know. And I think I think Lombardi coming in, he's got a lot of intangibles, and he's a big athlete. If you took our 4 quarterbacks walking in the door, you'd see 4 guys that are impressive-looking guys, Big Ten type quarterbacks, big arms. And that's positive.
You talked about this a little bit earlier, but how small your senior class is, how much is that changing what you're asking of or your expectations of some more of the younger guys on the team?
I think, as I said earlier, I think when you have a group of, football goes in cycles, as I think I said earlier. Okay, but if you have a large senior class, your recruiting class is probably smaller. Conversely, if you have a larger recruiting class, your senior class is smaller. So when there's a group of seniors that's light in terms of numbers, it gives opportunity for other people to grow and experience leadership. Brian Lewerke, Joe Bocci, those type of guys, like Grayson Miller, Kari Willis. Those guys are great leaders, and they're younger players. So it gives opportunity. Matt Sokol, and I can go on, Cole Chewins. Those guys can rise up because there's opportunity to rise up and lead. And it's not looked down upon because everybody else around them is leaders. When I ask our guys to stand up and say, who's been a captain on our football at their high school level, who's been a captain on their football team, I would say 80 to 90% of our guys stand up. So now they have to reassert themselves, and if they can do that at an earlier age, it just bodes well for the future.
One of the things Gerald said about you is he thought you seemed more laser focused. Even I don't know if you've noticed it. Has there been a difference in you? I mean, maybe that's just one player noticing something with a more keen awareness to things, but.
Yeah, everybody's got to take responsibility. Certainly I take a great deal of responsibility, or the most responsibility for last year. So I have to assess what I did and how I reacted, and maybe we won a lot of games. And maybe I didn't hold people as accountable as I needed to, or maybe something went off track there. I don't know. But I'm going to make sure that we're all in. I am going to make sure that we are all in. That's every coach, that's every player. And we're going to all go in the same direction. So maybe there is a laser-like focus.
Has there been a moment in the last 2 months that everything felt a little more normal, back to normal?
There's been a moment. Yeah, there has. We've gotten back to normal, back to laughing, back to loving this game and football, and letting our young people be young people, not lecturing them all the time and all that kind of stuff. There has been. And I think we have to get back to that. And next week we're going to open it up so you guys can see our players, be around our players even more. Because I think they need that, and Spartan Nation needs that.
Mark, Gerald was wearing pins for Mike and Mylon Hicks. And the further you go, there's fewer people connected in terms of players with those guys. How much do you try and still link those guys a part of this team and understand what they were about?
Well, they will always be a part of our football team. I was at the Mike Sadler event yesterday, and I think there were almost 500 people there. I don't know if any of you guys were there.
800.
800, but it was an outpouring of support and love for the Sadler family, and a lot of former players were there, and parents, former player parents. So, Mylon as well, same type of thing. I don't think they've had a function for him yet. outside, but there's something coming with that. So those guys will always be loved and respected by myself. But as time goes and people don't have that personal relationship with them, it probably does become more difficult. But we'll try and keep their legacy alive.
Do you talk to the guys, talk to the new players about, hey, this is what these guys were like? And
I'm sure that they do.
Important?
I'm sure that they do.
Mark, what do you think about your own riders? Like the best teams in the Big Ten have taken over the teams maybe at the bottom half of the Big Ten and rising all the way to the top. There are a couple of new members, including Jeff Thomas. If you were to give a blueprint for a guy like that to take over teams at the bottom and rise to the top, what would you say?
Don't let the cat out of the bag. No, I just think believe in what you coach and continually stress on the foundations that have brought you to your place. Stress on the foundations the foundation process that allowed you. Day one, when I walked into Michigan State, said we all needed to be together, go forward in the same direction. You play great defense, be opportunistic on offense, and be superior special teams, which is what I learned along the way. And that's what we try to do. And, in the course of things, that's what we got. I walked by the first team All Big Ten wall the other day, and there's Aaron Bates, there's Mike Sadler, there's Dan Conroy. Those guys were first team All Big Ten performers at kicker and punter. So it starts very simplistically.
The challenges they face is kind of break the cycle. Don't have a lot of success in the field, not a lot of success in recruiting. What's the key to breaking that cycle?
Well, you bring in certain individuals, and they break the cycle for you. And I would say the first guy to come in to break that cycle would be a guy like, I'll just give you two, Greg Jones and Kirk Cousins. Greg, two-time All-American, stayed for his senior year. Kirk Cousins, three-time captain. And they started to break that cycle, but along the way you had guys, your football team that bought in, like Brian Hoyer and Javon Ringer. They bought into what you were selling and believing, and you put your faith in people and you build into people. And the one thing that we did do, as I remember back to 07, we didn't come in there and say, hey, we have all the answers, or these guys have to go. We embraced everybody, and we brought people together.
Mark, has the conference changed much, especially in the last 4, 5, 6 years with the influx of new coaches?
Yeah, I think the conference has changed. You have new teams in it. You have a new structure of conferences. You have new philosophies with the offense, defense, special teams. I think change is always inevitable.
Have you seen schools try and ramp up their programs, maybe?
Ramp them up?
Ramp them up. More,
yeah, I think that's
schools.
Yeah, I think that's the basis for college football. It's an ongoing process, and always it's a race against time.
You guys use the phrase "unsolicited" earlier. So is that kind of the phrase for this year? Or
we sort of take on phrases as they go. We sort of, but really what we've put on some things is the best start here. Your very best has got to start day one, first meeting, first class, first tutoring session, walking off the field. Your best has to be the standard. You have to. There is no substitution. You must overachieve here. You must overachieve because everybody comes with a layer of talent or a level of talent, and you have to go beyond your expectations.
Mark, your incoming class, do you expect all them to be able to be eligible, ready to go camp day one?
I expect all of them are in place. We have one guy that we've signed that's completing a class.
Is he ready?
Shakur. He should be done. So everybody will be here.
You didn't get a chance to talk about him after he signed. Wide receiver going to be out of Georgia. What can you tell us about him as a player?
He was offered by quite a few SEC teams. We saw him as a guy who was light on some core classes. He was able to make those up. Great punt returner. I think he was a very exciting wide receiver and defensive back corner. And I think he's got a high ceiling. He's got a great skill set.
And early in camp, are we doing a little bit of both, or how do you handle him?
We'll see how he comes in. I think the biggest thing, because he lost a lot of the conditioning and everything, is to make sure that he doesn't overexert it. We don't overtrain him. and then he comes up with a hamstring or something like that. But I think he has a skill set, and we lost some guys, but we've replaced those guys.
Mark, in your tenure here
I'd like to ask you about Dave Rayner.
Yeah.
With you, and then second of all, with all the staff assignments, will Mark Snyder still be handling special teams?
Dave Rayner, first of all, we've hired Dave as an intern. He's 8 or 9 year NFL veteran kicking. I think he's got experience with our specialists in terms of just talking with them and being around them, and maybe help them from a philosophical standpoint or from a psychological standpoint. But I think that he can add a great deal of, we've not had a guy that is per se the kicking coach or the punting coach. We've done this by different levels. So I think that's going to give our players a little bit more somebody to be around. He obviously can't coach them, but he can be around them. So this is an opportunity for him to get involved in college coaching. And then special teams wise, Mark Snyder is now coaching the defensive ends. He will be our special teams coordinator. But as I've always said, Mike Tressel handles the punt. Snides handles the kickoff, and the kickoff return is handled by Brad Salem. Our field goal is handled by Mark Stateman. Our field goal blocked by Ron Burton. And every one of those guys have a staff. So our special teams has always been, pretty much tied together as a staff, and collectively as a group we make decisions philosophically.
Mark, we've seen in the last decade your old mentor, Jim Tressel, the Joe Paterno body bout, and legendary Hall of Fame coaches who have not been able to write their own ending, circumstances beyond their control, be it administrative or otherwise.
Didn't you come in and ask a tough question before?
I did.
Go ahead.
So how important is it to you, as your ending comes at Michigan State, eventually soon, late, we don't know, how important is it to you to write your own ending?
Well, everybody wants to write their own ending to their story. I don't know if you're able to or not, but everybody wants to. And my focus when I came here was that I wanted to reestablish Michigan State football and leave a legacy and leave it in a good place. That's what I wanted to do. And that's my intent, and that's what I'll do.
Did the last year change how you...
And you need to have support. You need to have support to be able to do that from our administration, from the various people, our athletic director, our administration, etc. And I feel very supported.
Did the last year change the way you view your eventual ending?
In what way?
Just
let me ask you that question.
Maybe
What way?
Maybe, did you think about it more? You have one win in the league. You have serious off-field issues. I don't know if you put more thought.
I never really looked at that aspect. There's not a game that we couldn't have won on that schedule. I really go back and I look at every football game, and we have an opportunity to win. The incident that happened hadn't happened in 10 years previous. It happened. We deal with it. We dealt with it. We dealt with it in a way that I think was the only way we could, and the best way we could. And we dealt with it in a very forthright and honest way. And I'm challenged to, whether I was here last year, coming off a Big Ten championship, or whether I'm here now, the mindset's the same. And the challenges really are the same. You got to win. You got to move forward. If you want to look at it really in depth, we won two out of the 4 last Big Ten championships. So this is a program that has substance to it, that has been in a great place, that took a step backwards, and now we need to respond.
What's your confidence level, Mark, on your future? Like, I want to coach X amount more years?
No, I really haven't. I think when you talk about those things. When you hit 45, you talk about those things, okay? But I really haven't put a timetable on it. I feel good physically, feel good mentally. I love our players. I like seeing people reach their potential. I like seeing people reaching their performance level, not just as a football player, but as a person. And I like to see growth.
So, Mark, obviously the data results set of last year was very, very different than the data results set from the 9-10 previous years before that.
Right.
Why should we believe...
But we've got to count them all.
Yeah. Why should we believe it will revert back to the Big Ten championships and such, as opposed to one win in the conference?
You a betting man?
I'm not. I can't. It's unethical.
It's unethical. Why should we believe it? Because I'm your coach. How's that?
Well, you're not my coach.
I'm their coach.
Okay.
The Spartans will.
All right. Well, what specifically has changed that will enable that?
What specifically has changed?
Yes.
The change was in last year.
Correct.
The change was last year. Look beyond last year. Look beyond last year, look back. But next question.
You're talking about the players. We're talking about the players and the chip on their shoulder.
Considering the culture you built and the success you've had, was it disappointing that it didn't spill over and protect what happened last year?
The culture that we established is the reason that I'm still sitting here, quite honestly. Had that culture never been established, I doubt very seriously if I would be here. Okay, but I think that that what we have done previously in establishing what we've done, and as I said at the podium, when you talk about success in college football, Michigan State was one of the 4 places probably. Hey, we lost the playoff game, but we were 12-2. We were 36-5 prior to that. So, this is an anomaly what we went through in terms of this past season. Obviously, the off-the-field incidents hadn't happened either, so we're dealing with that. But as I said before, I was hired to handle problems. Sometimes there's going to be problems. Sometimes there's going to be great things that happen for you. But it's easy to wear the hat. It's easy to wear the Rose Bowl hat. Much more difficult when you're not. But, my plan is to move forward and keep it pushing.
We're talking about the players relishing that chip on the shoulder and being counted out. For you and your staff, whether it was complaints about offensive play calling last year or how you covered certain plays, how much are you and your staff kind of relishing that as well, looking forward to that, kind of making sure last year?
Well, the chip on your shoulder comes from and I've said this before, it comes from within. It's not necessarily a chip towards anybody else. It's just a challenge or a want to be excellent in anything that you do, to write the best story, to ask the toughest question. That comes from within you, to be challenging the competitive nature in you. And I believe that football is execution. I used to know a guy that says, run that play again when the guy catches the ball in the middle of the field and runs 60 yards for a touchdown. Okay, football is about execution. Every play is designed to work or fail. You got to make the call. Sometimes you got too many, I call it TMM, too many men's. You got too many men's at the point of attack. You can't get, you're not going to make any yards. Other times it's going to split you. So I think play calling is difficult because you have 15 seconds to make a decision, and you have to come up with a play that works. But at the end of the day, it's execution as well, or tackling in space, or carrying the ball, or who knows what happens if we don't fumble the football and it's 13-7 against Wisconsin, and we're driving into the red zone. Who knows what happens if we're against Michigan and we're in the red zone inside the 26 times. So who knows what happens? Who knows what happens if you make the 2-point play against Ohio State? I mean, these are all close games. So what do you say? You just keep moving.
You talked a little bit last year about RPOs and some of the issues those caused for your defense. How much has that been a focus this offseason, and how hard is it with young guys to teach them to defend that play?
Well, big focus. First of all, I think you have to reinvent your philosophy somewhat. You have to understand what you're trying to do. So a major part of our film study and off-the-field study has been investigating RPOs, what makes it, how to perform against it, how to perform with them. And that's been a big part of what we've tried to do.
Snyder going to defensive end, is that part of that?
Yeah, I think the defensive end play nowadays is a little bit different, even in a 4-3. We also wanted to reduce the number of player-coach ratio in the defensive line. We didn't want to have it 20-1. We wanted to have it more like 10-1. So that was a move we made. And Ron Burton did a tremendous job, but I just felt like defensive ends with all the RPOs, they made the defensive end their greatest pass rusher. They were creating situations where they had to restart themselves. So they needed to be coached differently.
Coach, you've had 2 years now going against Coach Harbaugh and the rivalry against Michigan. How has that changed for you at all? Have you seen any kind of change in the rivalry since Coach Harbaugh's taken over?
No, it's always been a great rivalry. It's always been very intense. I think Coach Harbaugh obviously is a great coach, and he's got them moving in the right direction, certainly. And got a lot of respect for him, but it's always been a great rivalry ever since I've been involved back in '95 with Coach Carr.
You were mentioning recruiting class sizes earlier. Obviously, a few months ago, it looked as though this class was going to be relatively small. Do you have any idea how big this could get, or is it still too early to tell?
This coming season, I would say it can probably be around 20, 21.
Around what?
20 or 21, possibly.
One more.
You're talking a little bit about.
You don't mind.
I'll let you go first.
Gerald Holmes mentioned.
Is this going to be a good question? What's your name?
It's a tough question. I'm Pete Thamel. I work for Yahoo.
Oh yeah, write that down. Go ahead.
Gerald Holmes mentioned some racial tension in the locker room last year. That's something from your level has to be difficult to face and deal with. I'm wondering how you did that.
Yeah, I'm not aware of that.
Okay.
I didn't sense that. But I'll ask Gerald.
Okay. He mentioned it over there. So.
Next question.
As far as position groups that have to be better than last year, where does defensive end kind of sit in that list, I guess?
Well, I think defensive end is a position where, build around pressure on the quarterback, a lot of times. And so I think a lot of the RPO things, as we talked about earlier, negated some of that pressure. We had young players playing at that position as well. We had graduated Shalit. And LT had played there, so we've graduated some good players. But so I think there's a learning process there, and those guys have to excel. I think every great defense has a couple of defensive ends that are going to have to excel.
Who are some of the personnel there? You and I have talked about that a little bit a couple of weeks ago. But what do you see?
Well, I think Brandon Randall's a guy that can get involved. I think I tell Justice Alexander all the time. We can't. I mean, how can you really recruit a guy that can long jump 10 feet and is 6'5" or 250 pounds? He runs 4.65. So Willikis is a guy, and we've got a lot of guys that have played some, and they have to assert themselves and see where they're at. So Cooper maybe a little bit. Obviously, if he comes back, Robert Bowers has played, Dylan Alexander's played. So we've got guys that have played a lot of football there.
Alexander still on scholarship? You said they were for the summer, but you didn't know.
Yes, Willikis definitely for sure, and I would anticipate Dylan being as well.
And Cooper was not on scholarship in the spring semester, or you said earlier about him going back on scholarship. I assume that he was off scholarship.
He's off scholarship. He's non-renewed.
Non-renewed for the spring.
Non-renewed for this fall.
Oh, not
yet.
Starting
it back.
So
we'll see what happens.
So those defensive ends like Alexander, you talked about his physical ability. When you see him on the field, what does it look like, and what does he need to?
He needs to grow from a maturity standpoint. But he has the skill set.
Bowers started up 3 games in the last year. I think he's added maybe 15 pounds, is he? Maybe 20. Yeah. How has his offseason gone since then? Did that help?
He's about 250. He's about 250 pounds or so. So I think he's ready to go. He's got to have a great fall camp.
He responded well to getting that chance at the end of the year last year?
Yeah, he did. I think he's more energized. He's more motivated. He's ready to go too. So we've got quite a few guys that will compete for those positions.
We haven't talked about LJ at all. What's kind of the next step he has to take being a back for you guys?
LJ had 2 surgeries, so unable to play in the spring, so he's just got to get his strength back, which he has. He is currently. And then he's got to come in and have a great camp, which he's very capable of. He's a dynamic football player, but we have other good football players at the tailback position. Both Mondre London and Gerald Holmes are 2 guys that I think are good football players that can play a lot of different places in America.
Do you feel there's more pressure on the run game this year now that with Brian being he played?
No, I have a lot of confidence in our quarterbacks as well.
But just not a ton of experience for him versus your backfield. You get all 3 guys back. There wasn't really any depth lost in that one.
Yeah,
position.
there was no depth lost there. I don't feel any more pressure to run the football. I think we do have to run the ball to win football games. I think that's necessary, but I also think we need to throw it.
What about the competition to be the one who carries the ball? Those guys have all had their chances, but that's going to be pretty competitive too. It has to be.
Yeah, it'll be competitive. I mean, as much as they talk about LJ being a great back nationally, got to be the best back in Michigan State first, which I think he's capable of being. But there's other 2 guys, good football players. Mondre was the starter going into the 15 season, and Gerald has had his moments last year, so. and he's got a leadership aspect in what he's trying to do. And all three of these guys are 225 pounds plus, and all can run. So it's a good situation.
What about the defensive backfield? I mean, there's a chance you could be starting a true freshman at corner. It seems like it's been a while since you've had that sort of inexperience, certainly on the corners.
Yeah, we knew we were going to be inexperienced at corner because we lost some guys. Tyson Smith, we'll see how he comes back, but I think Josiah Scott has sort of set himself into the starting position. I mean, I think he had a tremendous spring as an early incoming freshman. I think he reminds you a lot of Daquez in terms of how he handles things, very on point, etc. I think he'll be an excellent player for us.
Is Justin Lane a guy?
Justin Lane's another guy.
Do you see him as a guy who can play both ways, or you want to kind of focus on defense right now?
We're going to focus on defense right now, but I think he has Trey Wayne ability, and he's got to grow up. He's got to become more. He's got to recognize things on the field clear. He's got talent, a lot of talent.
A little farther down the depth chart, TJ Harrell moved over there in the spring. What have you seen from him since the spring? He showed a little bit of flash in the spring game
a little bit. Haven't really seen. We'll find out. We'll have to have a good camp because I think that the freshmen that we have, Emmanuel Flowers, Trey Person, Josiah Scott, Justin Lane, Austin Andrews is playing safety right now. Probably leaving somebody else out. Or Pryor a little bit, but I think that those freshmen look pretty good.
Really?
Moving around.
Safeties.
Just seeing them moving around. I don't see them tackling anybody yet.
We'll ask you about this getting in 2 weeks, but we see that the safeties have had a little bit of weight in the off-season. What do those guys need to do during the summer? Any thoughts on that?
Well, they just need to work on their knowledge. They're still young players. They'll be Kari and Grayson are back. They started as true freshmen in the 15th season. So they're back for their third year. And, usually it takes 3 years to sort of set your, really establish yourself in terms of what's going on at the safety position, much like Curtis Drummond. So I think they're poised, but, Kari Willis, Matt Morris, he's had a good spring, and Dom Long is there. He's a new freshman who's an outstanding athlete, big-bodied athlete. I think David Dow has had a very, very good spring and has corner skills playing at safety. So it's possible.
Coach, I hate to do this. We got a live network TV